What is a historic milestone for the small block family? This is the 6th generation of the Chevrolet small block. We celebrate generations of Corvette. It's a massive milestone for all of us in here. There's only been 6 on the small block, so it's even more rare and special when we get to do an all-new engine. And we're super proud to have the most powerful standard engine in a Corvette ever. I recall I had a C6 Z06 and thinking, wow, 505 horsepower, that car is absolutely incredible. Could never imagine that. It would have 30 less horsepower than the standard Corvette some years later. It's just another testament, like I was talking about before, how far we've come in performance. If you're going to take away one thing, I heard Mike say the same thing, I completely agree with him, it's this chart. And especially the torque curve. One thing you should notice is that the LS6 is making the same amount of peak torque that the LT2 makes at only 3,000 RPM. So that significant underfoot, we call it, torque immediacy is another way to describe it. That gives you that confidence, that authority of instant response is ever present. It's always present in a small block, but especially in an LS6. The increased stroke and compression really helped us eke some massive torque out of the engine. And of course, 535 horsepower. We did this, I was telling the engine team, you guys just did old school hot rodding. I mean, of course everyone would do a bigger throttle body and a tunnel ram intake and port cylinder heads, and that is in fact exactly what they did. They have a little more powerful tools than some of the hot rodders probably had, but the physics still apply. And so starting with the intake manifold, it's got a 95 millimeter throttle body, LT2 is 87. Remember, I've said this to this group before, more air, more fuel, more power. It's a pretty simple formula. So we need an engine to be a super efficient air pump. For those that know what a tunnel ram intake manifold looks like, this intake manifold will look familiar. That's what it is. It helps with increasing velocities of the intake charge, which can help tuning. As most know, air has got its own inertia and it's also compressible. Just like the LT6 and all the other engines that we do, we can tune that intake pulse of air to give massive volumetric efficiency. In fact, this engine has more than 100% volumetric efficiency. But the big change was in the stroke. So the bore is carryover. 103.25 millimeters, I think, is the bore. But we increased the stroke by 8 millimeters to get the displacement up to 6.7 meters. And I would have been surprised. I'm sure some of you were reading rumors online and maybe you weren't as surprised by the time we actually announced this, but the fact that we're making engines bigger seems counterintuitive to efficiency. But there was one big enabler here, and that is for more torque, more authority during active fuel management. I know active fuel management is not everyone's favorite, but I've told this group many times, the alternative is a 6-cylinder. I don't think you'd like that. And so when we can get more efficiency out of that function, out of that engine, we can get more peak power. And when you want to use a Corvette the way it was meant to be used, that power is certainly there, but now in a more efficient way. And the compression ratio is astonishing for anyone that's familiar with compression ratio in engines. 13-to-1 is, it's getting close to diesel. It's a massive compression ratio, would be completely impossible without the advancements in controls, processing speed on the controllers themselves, the way they can process data and react in real time. This wouldn't have been possible before, certainly on 91 octane. Made significant revisions to everything. The only thing that the LS6 really carries over is a couple of fasteners and the bore spacing. Everything else is new. This is, again, that's why it's a generational change in the engine. And one of the big changes was in the cylinder head and the way we're cooling the cylinder head, which is obviously very critical. You want to get especially the hot spots of the cylinder head cooled and extract that heat out as quickly as possible. And that's enabled by 2 different pathways for coolant inside the cylinder head, and one of those is targeted at the really hot spot in the combustion chamber, which happens to be the exhaust valve and the spark plug. Lube system is also new, completely new. It's got a variable displacement and pressure oil pump, a second feed passage for the main bearings. That's the most important, one of the most important bearings in an engine. That's where all the load is transferred through. So we want to keep that well lubricated. We have a second coolant passage there. And then because this engine goes in a car like a Corvette that's capable of significant lateral Gs, if anyone saw, those that did see Casey and Mike's presentation, they showed a video of the engine on a tilt stand, which is pretty entertaining. And it's showing the engine tilting at 45 degrees. That simulates, going around a turn at 1 G. Well, the problem is the Corvette can go around a turn at a lot more than 1 G, if we can these days, and it can decelerate way faster than a G. And so the tilt stand's an indicator, but the final proof is testing cars on the racetrack. One of our challenges always has been managing oil separation and crankcase ventilation when you're subject to those high track loads. That's why all 8th generation Corvettes have a dry sump. And one of the reasons that with this new lubrication system, we needed to pay special attention to that performance. It's also got a second injection system. So like the LT2 had direct injection, the LS6 adds port fuel injection. And we do that for emissions. And actually emissions is one of the reasons for this engine coming to be. There are more stringent emissions requirements coming at us, and this engine meets those requirements. And we could have emissionized, I'll call it, the LT2. We could have invested in that engine to make it meet emissions, but it would not have made more power. It would not have done all the cool things the LS6 does, and certainly wouldn't have benefited the car the way the LS6 benefits the car. So another example of we do things even if they're hard to serve the mission of Corvette and make Corvette better for it. All right, I'll get into exhaust a little bit. A lot of you have probably heard one of the cars start up outside. There's no mistaking LS6. It doesn't sound like an LT2. The stroke and compression are a big reason for that. But the other big reasons are the exhaust system itself. So the exhaust manifold is all new. It's a tri-Y configuration. Many hot rodders are familiar with that. Instead of a 4-into-1, it's a tri-Y. Oftentimes tri-Ys are not as good at flow performance as a 4-into-1, but not the case here, where we're able to maintain that and reduce surface area, which helps improve emissions. We need to get rid of the wetted area for cold start to improve emissions. Again, the mission of this engine was to meet emission standards, but we wanted to go beyond doing that and get the performance as well. And then of course, all our learnings from Z06. Remember when we were standing up here telling you what we did on Z06 to improve the exhaust sound? The only single positive thing I can think about that happened in COVID, we delayed Z06, but we took advantage of it to build this new exhaust system because we thought the car could be louder, more character. And as a part of this development, we paid special attention to a bunch of different areas. One of those is actually in the bezel of the exhaust pipes themselves. So they have parabolic surfaces that reflect that noise back toward the driver, so you can hear that sound. And building off that learning from Z06 and then ZR1 and ZR1X, we adapted the system to work on an LS6, but we can't just bolt on that exhaust system. We have to add AFM valves and tune those, and then of course change the flange to match the catalytic converter flanges on the LT6. But inside that muffler was carefully tuned baffles, and the sound is amazing if you haven't heard it yet. There'll be more startups later today. Some cooling system revisions. I had a few questions about what we did with the cooling system. So for all LS6s, we added another aux radiator. We call them step-down coolers. So both left and right side of car have auxiliary radiators now to help manage, power and efficiency, more power at the same efficiency, even though the engine's a little more efficient, still generate more heat, and you have to reject that heat. So we added an auxiliary radiator, and then on the Grand Sport, we thickened the front radiator, the front corner radiators, borrowing from Z06 and ZR1. So we're using that thicker core on the Grand Sport to help cool that powertrain. You might say, well, the engine's the same, why does Grand Sport need more cooling? Well, remember, it's got more lateral capability given the size of the tires, so if customers are taking their car to the track, they're going to be rejecting more heat into the cooling system. And then for ZR1X, here's an upgrade that people may not have thought about, but because we made these cooling system changes, we were able to get rid of the front center radiator. So E-Ray has a front center radiator to help cool the power electronics and the battery. And some of you were complaining, I lost my one relatively cool compartment because now there's a radiator in front of it. And so we listened to you and found a way to get rid of that center radiator. And so now you have a relatively cool frunk. It actually makes the bottom of it a little bit larger because there's not cooling lines passing around it. And another reason for all Grand Sports to have the front fascia lower, we call it, that's the center of the front fascia. You notice the difference in the block off for the grille. If you don't need to flow any cooling air, then we don't do it because it reduces drag and improves aerodynamic efficiency. So adding that block off helps do that as well.